I want to start today's episode by challenging something that I genuinely think is doing a lot of damage. It's this idea that motivation is what separates the people who get in shape from the people who don't. You see it everywhere. Every fitness advert, every transformation photo, every motivational quote telling you to want it more. And the message is always the same. If someone succeeds, they must have been more motivated, more disciplined, more committed. And if you've struggled, well, maybe you just didn't want it enough. I simply don't believe that's true because after coaching high-performing men for over 20 years, that's not what I've seen. The men who completely transform their health aren't more motivated than anyone else. They're not born with more discipline. They are not mentally stronger. In most cases, they failed just as many times as you have. They started programs, they stopped programs, promised themselves this is the last time, then watched history repeat itself. So what changed? It wasn't their desire, it wasn't their willpower, it was structure. And today I want to show you exactly what I mean by that. We'll talk about why motivation eventually lets everyone down, no matter how driven they are. We'll look at what structure actually means because I think most people misunderstand it. And then I'll show you how to build a system that works even when life gets busy. Because let's be honest, that's when most people come unstuck. This is the executive body. Let's start with motivation itself. I think we've all been sold the wrong idea here. Motivation isn't a personality trait. It isn't something people have or others don't. Motivation is simply an emotional state. And emotional states change. They change depending on how well you slept, how stressful work has been, whether the kids kept you awake, whether you've just had a great week or a terrible one. It's constantly moving, which means by its very nature, it's unreliable. Now, here's the pattern I've seen hundreds of times. Someone decides they are finally going to get serious about their health. They are fired up. They've watched a video, read a book, stepped on the scales, seen a photo they didn't like. Something creates enough emotional pain to make them take action. So they start strong. They train. They meal prep. They hit every workout. Everything is going brilliantly. Then life happens. A busy week at work, family commitment, a poor night's sleep, travel, unexpected meetings. The routine gets interrupted. They miss one session, then another. Nutrition slips for a few days, and then suddenly the momentum has gone. Most people look at that and think, I just don't have enough discipline. I don't. I see someone whose entire plan was resting on a feeling. And feelings don't last. That's not a character flaw. That's human nature. If the only thing holding your health together is motivation, eventually it's going to disappear. Simple as. Because motivation was never designed to carry that weight. That's exactly why systems outperform feelings every single time. Here is something I've noticed over the years. The men we work with are incredibly driven. They've built companies. They solve problems all day long. And because of that, they're actually very good at creating motivation. They know how to switch it on. They've done it throughout their careers. When something matters, they dig deep. The problem is they become dependent on that feeling. They wait until they feel motivated before they act. And that works until life gets too full. Because eventually, there comes a point where work is demanding, family needs you, energy is lower than it used to be, and suddenly you can't rely on motivation anymore. And I'll bring up an example because I remember one client in particular. Jim had a proper athletic background. And we're talking years of CrossFit, years of weightlifting. Training had always been part of who he was. Then he reached his mid-40s. Business became busier, life evolved, the competitions disappeared. And one day he said something that really stuck with me because he said, I just wasn't finding it motivating anymore. Nothing dramatic had happened. He hadn't become lazy. He hadn't lost his work ethic, the thing that had always driven him had simply stopped showing up. For the next 5 years, he described his training as reactive. A few sessions here, around there, mostly when he felt like it. Sometimes just to clear his head. There was no consistency underneath it because there was no real structure holding it together. And naturally, his results reflected that. What changed wasn't his motivation, it was the way he organized his life. He built structure into his day. He knew when he was training. He knew where it fitted around work. He stopped relying on how he felt each morning. And during one conversation, he said something I'll never forget. He said, one discipline begets another, begets another. And I think that's such a powerful way of looking at it, because once you create that structure in one area of your life, it becomes much easier to create it everywhere else. Busy people don't get things done because they feel motivated or feel more motivated than everyone else. They get things done because they've built systems that don't depend on motivation in the first place. There's one version of the motivation myth that I think is especially dangerous. It's the belief that you'll start when the time is right. I hear it over and over again. When this project is finished, when work settles down, when the kids are a little older, after holidays, New Year, when things calm down. I've been coaching long enough to know one thing. Life doesn't ever calm down. It changes. One project finishes, another one begins. One problem gets solved, another one appears. The busy season isn't the exception anymore. For most high performance, it's the baseline. So if your plan depends on life becoming easier, you're probably going to be waiting a very long time. Because the real question isn't when life becomes less busy. It's, can the systems that I'm building survive a busy life? Because that's the system that lasts. That's the one thing that gets the results. Now, when I say the word structure, I think a lot of people immediately picture something incredibly rigid. Every meal weighed, every hour planned, never missing a workout, never eating out, never having any flexibility. That's not what I mean. In fact, I'd argue that that's exactly why so many plans actually fail. Real structure isn't rigid. Real structure is resilient. It's built for real life. It's designed to keep working when things don't go to plan, because they won't. Let me give you a definition that I think explains it really well. For me, structure is a set of decisions that you've already made so you don't have to keep making them. Think about that for a second. Every time you ask yourself, am I going to train today? You're making another decision. Every time you wonder, what shall I have for lunch? That's another decision. Every time you think, maybe I'll skip workout today and go tomorrow, you're negotiating with yourself. Now compare that to your business, for example. You don't wake up on a Monday morning and ask yourself whether you feel like attending your meeting at 9 a.m. or not. You don't decide on a day whether you're going to speak to your biggest client or not. Why? Because those decisions have already been made. They're in the diary, they're non-negotiable. And health should work exactly the same way. The workout is already scheduled. The food has already been planned. The walk has its place in the day, in the diary. The decision has already been made. And that's where structure becomes incredibly powerful, because it removes the daily negotiation. It removes the decision fatigue. Over the years, I've noticed something interesting. The clients who sustain incredible results don't necessarily do more than everyone else. They just have a stronger foundation. And in my experience, that foundation has 4 parts. If one of them is missing, the whole thing becomes fragile. The first thing is written training plan. Not the I'll try and get to the gym a few times a week. That's not a plan. That's wishful thinking. A proper plan says Monday, 6:30 a.m., upper body, 45 minutes, that's it. Wednesday, lower body, Friday, full body, specific. Because the more vague your plan is, the easier it is to negotiate the way out of it. The second is a nutrition framework. Notice I didn't say diet or a meal plan. I actually don't like the word very much because diets usually have an end date. Frameworks become part of your lifestyle. You don't need perfection. You don't need to eat chicken and broccoli 7 days a week. You simply need to understand what good looks like. Enough protein, the right amount of food, mostly good choices, some flexibility. When you understand the framework, you stop relying on willpower every time you sit down to eat. The third one is tracking. Now, if you're a business owner or an executive, this should make perfect sense. You wouldn't dream of running your business without data, revenue, profit, cash flow, performance. You measure the things that matter. Yet when it comes to your health, people guess. Well, I think I'm eating well. I think I'm sleeping enough. I think I'm training hard. The problem is, our memory isn't very reliable. Tracking gives you feedback. It removes emotion. It replaces assumptions with facts. And once you have facts, you can make better decisions. End of story. What gets measured gets managed. And I'm sure that resonates with you if you run a business or deal with stuff like this on a daily basis. And the fourth, and honestly, I believe this is the most underestimated one, is accountability, real accountability. Again, not an app, not good intentions, not accountability to yourself, to another human being, someone who knows what you're working towards, someone who knows what you've done and what you haven't done. I'll talk more about that in a moment because I genuinely think it's one of the biggest reasons people either succeed or slowly drift back to where they started. Here's the shift that changes everything. Motivation asks you to feel something before you act. Structure asks you to act regardless of how you feel. And here's the interesting part. When you act consistently, even on the days that you don't feel like it, something starts to change. Your identity begins to change. You stop seeing yourself as someone who's trying to get fit. You become someone who trains, someone who looks after themselves, someone who simply does these things because that's who they are. I've watched it happen time and time again. Every client who stayed the course tells me some version of the same story. Usually somewhere around month 3 or 4, something shifts. Training doesn't suddenly become easy. Eating well doesn't suddenly become effortless. It's just that they stop asking themselves whether they're going to do it, and that's it. The internal debate disappears. It's no longer, should I train today? It's simply, today is a training day. That might sound like a small difference. It isn't. It's everything. One of our clients, who's an economics professor, who lost over 40 pounds of body fat, explained it perfectly. He said, I get up at 5 o'clock every morning during the week now, and I train before work. Then he laughed and said, I used to tell everyone I wasn't a morning person. I'm not even sure that's true anymore. I think it's just, I never had the reason compelling enough to get out of bed. People often think they need to become a disciplined person before they can build disciplined habits. I've never found that to be true because the habits create the person. So how do you actually put this into practice? The first thing I tell every client is this: stop designing your health around your ideal week. Design it around your real one. Most people build a plan based on version of life that doesn't really exist. The week where every meeting finishes on time, that nothing unexpected happens. Nobody gets ill, work isn't stressful, travel doesn't get in a way, it gets cancelled. The kids sleep through every night, the Monday arrives, real life happens. And suddenly the whole thing falls apart. Not because the person failed, because the plan was never built for reality. Instead, I want you to start with the things that genuinely can't move. Your work commitments, family responsibilities, school runs, travel, the things that are already fixed. Then look honestly at what's left. Not what you wish was left, what actually exists. Maybe it's 45 minutes before work. Maybe it's your lunch break twice a week. Maybe it's one evening that consistently is quieter than the others. Those are the spaces you build around, not imaginary time, real time. Because if your structure works during an ordinary busy week, it will continue working when life inevitably throws something unexpected at you. In fact, I'd go one step further. Design your week for one of the busiest weeks that you're likely to have. Because if it survives that, it will survive almost anything. Now, I want to spend a minute talking about accountability because in my experience, it's probably the most overlooked part of all of this. Think about the areas of your life where you consistently perform at a high level. Your business, your career, your finances. And ask yourself this. Are those the areas where nobody knows what you're doing? Where there are no deadlines, no meetings, no reviews, no expectations? Of course not. The reason those areas tend to stay on track is because there's some accountability built into them. Someone is expecting something from you. A client, a board, a business partner, your team. There's a deadline, a number, a meeting, a report, something that keeps you engaged and moving forward. And yet when it comes to your health, most people try to do it completely alone. No one checking in, no one asking questions, no one noticing when they disappear for 3 weeks. Then they wonder why they keep drifting. That's not because they're weak. That's because they are human. I've lost count of the number of times a client said to me, Martin, I really don't feel like training today. But I knew you'd see that I hadn't logged it. Or I nearly ordered the takeaway, then I remembered I had my check-in tomorrow. People sometimes laugh when they say those things, almost if they're admitting a weakness. But I see it completely differently. I think that's one of the smartest things you can do because the most successful people don't rely on willpower. They build environments that make success more likely. That's all accountability is. It's another layer of structure, another piece of the system that's working for you, especially on the days when motivation isn't. One of our clients actually summed it up brilliantly. He said, when I log something in the app, I know someone on the other side of the world is going to see it. That's enough for me. It keeps me honest. And I love that because he wasn't saying he needed someone to tell him off. He was saying that simply knowing somebody else cared was enough to help him stay consistent. And that's exactly what good accountability should do. Let me finish with this. I think we've got a completely distorted view of consistency. People think consistency means never missing a workout, never eating off plan, never having a bad week, never making a mistake. It doesn't. The clients who achieve the best results in our program aren't the ones who train the hardest. They're not the ones with the most perfect weeks. They are the ones who keep showing up. Sometimes that means a great workout. Sometimes it means a shorter workout because work has taken over the day. Sometimes it means adjusting the session. And sometimes it means making the best choice available instead of the perfect one. They don't disappear because life got busy. They adapt. That's the difference. I often say this to clients. A 60% session that actually happens is infinitely more valuable than the perfect session you never did because you were waiting to feel motivated. That's what consistency looks like. Not perfection. Just continuing. Just refusing to let one bad day become a bad week. Or one bad week become another year. Because that's how remarkable transformations happen. Not through extraordinary effort, through ordinary actions, repeated over and over, week after week, month after month. Until one day people look at you and think, you're so disciplined. When the truth is, you simply built a better system. So, let me leave you with one thought. If you've been trying to get your health under control for years and it still hasn't stuck, please stop telling yourself that you are lazy. Stop telling yourself that you lack discipline. Stop telling yourself that you just need to find more motivation, because I honestly don't think that's your problem. I think your problem is structure. And the good news is structure can be built. So here's something I'd encourage you to do before even listen to the next episode. Open your calendar, find 3 training slots this week that you can genuinely protect. Not an ideal week. This week. Put them in your diary. Treat them exactly the same way you'd treat an important client meeting. Because once the decision has already been made, you stop negotiating with yourself every single day. And that's where consistency begins. And if you'd like help building that structure properly, the training, nutrition, accountability, and a system that actually fits around your demanding career instead of, fighting against it, head over to martinbugai.com/transform6. You'll find everything you need there, and good luck. My name is Martin Bugai. This is The Executive Body. I'll see you in the next episode.